welcome back to another episode of the Rebel Love podcast. Today, my guest is Carlen Costa, a clinical sexologist and registered psychotherapist. Carlen is a best-selling author of Love, The Women's Guide to Not Fucking Settling. She's a cannabis advocate and CEO of the Everyday Goddess Life Design community. She teaches women and men how to love with confidence through radical self-love and sacred science therapies. Welcome, Carlen.
Hi. Hey, goddess.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
So before we get started, I'd love it if you could share a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today. But before we move on to that, I know that today we're going to talk about the Women's Guide to Not Fucking Settling.
Yeah.
Fuckling.
Right,
today we're going to talk about the Women's Guide to Not Fucking Settling. And I want, when you talk about your journey, if you could go over a little bit about how you got to that, like is that in the journey? So that's what I just want to prompt, I guess.
Yeah. How did I get to becoming a woman who stopped fucking settling? Right? How does that happen? Well, I got frustrated with myself and I had some really big conversations. I was real with myself. It all started, I was actually in undergrad and I was going to go to law school. I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. I knew I was a human that wanted to change the world. I knew I was a human that wanted to work with other humans in some sort of service to humanity capacity. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. Like, that sounds really, really great. And then I just remember one day I woke up, I was like about to go and like buy the LSAT books, like go get ready. Like, this is what we're doing. And I woke up like in like a cold sweat in the middle of the night and just like this like big deep breath and was like, this is not my life. Like, I remember just shouting it and being like, wait, whoa, what is going on here? And it was that moment that I was like, I've actually been holding a lot of anxiety about this and not having a real conversation with myself about as to what my motivation is for going into this life, right? And is that the life that I do see myself happy in, right? And so I had a real conversation with myself. I looked at my strengths, I looked at my weaknesses, I just kind of reevaluated and recognized, hey, no, I actually want to be a therapist of some kind. I want to work with people. I want to hear people's stories. I want to hold space. I want to support people in that way. I want to heal their hearts. And then I decided, okay, well, if I'm going to be a psychotherapist, what is the most fun though that I can have for the rest of my life being a psychotherapist? So I was like, let's throw on being a clinical sexologist. Let's talk about sex. You're really good at it. Your friends talk to you about it all the time, right? I'm that friend. Everybody has that friend that you go when in the middle of the night, home from the bar, you've done too many shots, you've made out with the wrong person at the bar, and you need to eat, some street meat with somebody on the front steps on the porch and cry your face off. And I'm that friend. I'm the friend that you do those things with. So,
nice.
It just seemed to make sense. And it just kind of slipped into it.
Right. And what about the settling part? How did you so you wrote this book and how did you do it yourself?
How did I get to the book though?
Yeah.
How did I get to the book? Well, I got to the book because I got my heart torn out of me. I got my heart fucking torn out of me, actually, and thrown onto my kitchen floor. And I sat there after being in the relationship. Many of us have that relationship, that big relationship where really tests us. Is this the life that I want? Is this where I want to go? Right? Is this the one that I see myself really growing with and becoming who I want to become? And that after 7 years, we had the house, we had the dog. I invested all of these thoughts on, went off birth control, was thinking about the whole thing. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, here we go. Maybe this is the thing. And then we just had one big fight, and that I saw myself in the mirror. I just remember we were in the argument. I looked at myself in the screen of my computer. My screen had gone black and I saw myself, my face in the screen of my computer, and was like, never, this is not the person I want to be. So I ended that relationship. And from that moment on, the moment that I was sitting on the kitchen floor by myself, I had a bottle of wine in one side of me, a dog that I had just like taken into rest. I just rescued a dog because I needed so desperately to love something, and a big fat joint and a box of tissues. And I'm sitting on my kitchen floor. And it was that moment that I looked around and was like, okay, I'm never fucking doing this again. And I'm never fucking settling for someone else to write my story, because that's what I did up until now. And that's why I'm here, is that I allowed everybody else to write my story. And I had fucking enough of it. So from that moment on, and I remember it still so vividly, even like, it's been, oh goddess, man, almost 10 years. No, 8 years.
Wow.
And I remember that moment so vividly. I was like, this is not my life. And I'm going to be the author of my story now. I'm going to be active in this life. They say you can do whatever you want. They say you can manifest and attract whatever you want, but I'm going to do it.
I love that your realization was, this is not the person I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that realization before too.
We have to, I think everyone needs to ask themselves that. If you're not, then that's what I feel is what people refer to as when they say people are asleep.
Mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Is when you don't ask yourself that, but like, and have the guts to ask yourself that, because it takes a fuck ton of courage to ask yourself that honestly, right? And look at yourself in the mirror and be like, is this the person I really want to be? Is this how I see the limitations of my life? Right? Limiting beliefs and getting through limiting beliefs is what it looks like to not fucking settle. And that's what I decided in that moment. So I wrote this book because I know that that moment that I had is a moment that many women have had. You've had it.
Yeah, definitely. I've been with men who've wanted to be with me, and I'm like, this is not the life I choose. This is definitely not the life I choose. And it won't work. Like, maybe it'll work for a little bit, but I know it won't work. And so I don't want to put you through that, and I don't want to put me through that, because if I know that now, then and I think a lot of people know that, but then they ignore it. They're like, no, it'll get better, or I'll change him, or, I can change, and it's like, no. I mean, maybe you can. I'm not saying that it's impossible. It's Absolutely. Just, how likely is it? Is this just another lie to ourselves?
Well, you don't change people. People choose to change.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You can support people. You can be part of the enriching environment. You can help nurture the change.
Mm-hmm.
But you can never change people. People choose whether they change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of the key piece there, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, so let's talk about this then, because I know that often fear plays a really major role in why people settle. Mm-hmm. So do you have any advice on like how we can navigate these fears from allowing us to make choices that ultimately don't serve us?
Okay. How do you face your fears? Right? How do you look at yourself in the mirror and say, and have those conversations? Well, first of all, it's acknowledging. So it's an acknowledgement and saying out, or even just quietly acknowledging to yourself. You don't have to say it out loud, but just even quietly acknowledging in your heart and saying, hey, I hear you. When I'm hearing you say, this is not my life. This is not what I choose. I'm not choosing this. And if anybody out there is listening right now and they know that tiny little voice is going off in their heart, that's your Jiminy Cricket, I like to call, right? That's that gut feeling. That's a part of you that wants to be heard, right? And I think having these conversations is one of the first way that people can start to acknowledge this, right? So first of all, let us, you and I, we're talking about this, right? We're telling people that it is okay and it is safe to acknowledge that tiny voice and to actually hear it get louder. Secondly, if you are a person out there right now, I want you to know that it is safe. And I want you to know that if you just look at yourself, just look at yourself, inside yourself, and just hear what your heart has to say. It has a lot of beautiful love and a big message that it wants to tell you. And it is safe to trust yourself. It is safe to value yourself and to trust that what you say matters and means something. Because there's so many people out there that don't, and they question, and then they hide. And the problem is that fear is closely related to arousal. It actually comes from the same part of our brains, which is really interesting.
That is really
so it is, yeah. So it is easy for us to confuse the two. So we really have to think and feel our hearts, but use our minds and our ability to discern, right? And do the things like go on Instagram and find like red flag checklist memes. You know what I mean? Start like, if there's a place for you to start, maybe start taking some of those Cosmo quizzes and just like, but honest to goddess, get out there and measure, take a moment to measure your life and your relationship. There's a lot of really great resources out there.
That's
and
true.
See, right? Because if you are good where you are at, then you'll find is just motivation for growth, right? All you'll find is just, okay, how can I just do this better?
Mm-hmm.
But if you go out there and you see and you start to learn, wait a second, and you start to allow yourself to hear your heart voice, right? And face yourself, face your fears, face your voice, hear it. I know, I mean, these conversations are just really important, Talia. I think, these conversations and just saying, you know what, it's okay for you to trust yourself.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. I think that's a really, really important thing. Yeah. It's kind of like, I think often, maybe not for other people, but I know in the past, I've certainly kind of put more weight in other people's opinions than mine. And then I remember one day I was like, hang on a second, why am I trusting them more than I trust myself? Like that doesn't even make sense because we have totally different values. We live totally different lives. Like, why do I care what they think? And then I remember making a decision. Well, that's it. I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to be the master of my own destiny. I'm going to steer my own ship because that's what works for me. I know what works for me. And it's okay to have difference of opinions and different lives. And that's great that you are steering your ship because I'm going to steer mine.
Yes. You had your own kitchen floor mat moment.
Yeah, I've had a few little moments like that where you're just like, hang on a second. And also like moments, I think they unfold in your life. You know, when you're like the first time you realize that your parents aren't God and you realize that, or like, I remember the first time I remember thinking I disagreed with my mother. She said, because I always just take what she said as the truth. Right. And then I remember the day I was like, well, hang on, actually, I don't agree with that. And I was like, wow. In my head, I was like, wow. I disagree with her. And I was like, well, it's okay to disagree with her. I mean, my mother's amazing. So she was never controlling or anything like that. She never had any of that stuff. But, so she would, she'd welcome, okay, let's talk about it. Her answer is, let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Yeah,
And
of course.
it's great, but I just remember that feeling, and I was like, wow, it's like another identity moment where you're like, you're separate from your family. I can't remember what age I was, but I must have been youngish, because I
That
had a lot of opinions.
yes, same. Yeah, same. Absolutely. That is such a big like life development moment. Um, when you become you really start to nurture your independence from
Yeah.
your family and from your parents, and what that means and what that looks like for you, and when you recognize that your parents are just like people, right?
Yeah.
And everybody can make mistakes, and
Right.
not everybody, all of that
Yeah.
stuff. That is such a huge moment, and if you haven't had that moment yet, you need to have that moment because it's true,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I guess it's similar with partners. Sometimes people, and I think this is where the fear is, not the fear, I guess maybe I can't think of the word. The problem with putting someone on a pedestal is
Oh,
like
yes.
thinking that they're always right, or that they know better than you, right? And that's where the danger, that's what I was looking for. That's where the danger is of putting somebody on a pedestal. I was about to say treadmill then. On a pedestal. And and really thinking, oh well, because when they're up there, they know everything. And that's not, I don't know that a relationship can thrive in that environment. I think that it's very wonky.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It can't, like, here's the thing though. It can thrive if you lie to yourself that you're happy. Or some people, I mean, some people want to, some people it's in them to worship, right? So not, sorry, worshiping is different than exaltation on a pedestal. It's totally different, right? Because worshiping, you can worship another person, and it can be totally beautiful and vulnerable and very sexy, and very, it's about equal exchange, and that type of thing. But when you're putting people on a pedestal, what you're doing is saying your needs are above mine, your needs are better than mine, your needs are more important than mine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And which means I receive less, I deserve less, I am not as worthy. And there's a difference there, right? I think we need to discern that big difference, for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, the dynamics when you meet someone. And this ties back into the fear we were talking about. I think sometimes if you've been like alone for a while and you want a relationship, that's something that you're actually seeking out, then there can be that, I guess, that time that you may feel like this is my only option, or you kind of fall into it again out of fear, instead of really going, hang on, is stopping and going, is this what I choose? Is this really the best thing for me? And I love that your book's called Women's Guide to Not Fucking Settling, because I've always said that I'd rather be alone than settle. I just really would. I mean, I love, I've got a great life. So I'm not complaining. Like, I want someone who's going to come in and complement that, and we're going to have, this lovely bubble. And it's interesting now that I'm actually dating, because I'm realizing I'm so used to being alone that it's like, oh man, there's so much I have to learn, like to compromise, and that people do things differently. And I'm so used to doing things the way I like them, and it's not always going to be that way. So I'm like, oh,
It's totally challenging, isn't it? It's like such a challenge to the ego. You're like, oh, wait, people do things differently than me. People, and maybe it's a little better. You know what I mean? Or like, even if it's not, doesn't matter. Right?
yes,
Like it's,
yes,
and that, like, oof,
yeah,
that
letting it go,
humbling.
because
Yeah.
you're like, hang on, yeah, what are we, what's happening here? Are we having a fight about this, or are we having a discussion, or does it even matter? Is it important? One of the best things I learned in behavioral therapy was pick your battles. Pick
Yes.
your battles. It was related to children and therapy, but it's so true with anything in any relationship. It's like, pick your battles. Is this really something that you need to have a big long discussion about?
Absolutely. Well, I'd like, I mean, well, and it's, you become better at picking your battles when you become better at valuing yourself and valuing who you are, right? Because when, as a person myself who values myself very much, right? That also means then that I also know that I only have a limited amount of time. And the energy that I expend in that time is my choice. And time is incredibly valuable, if not one of the most valuable things in the world, and definitely in my life. I mean, I'm a psychotherapist. I bill by the hour, time runs my life, right? So I value my time. So I value how I expend my energy. So picking my battles and allowing myself to actively communicate with people, actively listen, right? Actively hold space for what is important here, and what am I choosing? It always comes back to, what am I choosing? And that's what motivates me to like stop sometimes, take a breath,
Yeah,
because
me
I can
too.
be quite hot-headed, I can be quite hot-tempered, right? I'm a
Yeah.
passionate sex doctor, that's what
Yeah.
happens.
That's right.
So yeah, so but honoring, the taking the breath and the picking of your battles, and saying I can be better, or what am I choosing, taking a breath and saying what am I choosing here.
Well, I think that certainly, addresses the question of like the fear thing, like stopping, going, what am I choosing? But what about if we're already in a relationship?
Okay.
And how can we kind of tell that we're settling in our relationship? So what if we like skip the step of stopping and now we're like in something and we're like, oh man, am I settling? Like, what questions can we ask ourselves to identify that?
Okay. All right. So how can you tell if you are settling? First thing is first is, do you wake up excited for your day? Right? Most people, or generally speaking, people who are not settling, wake up. When I wake up in the morning, I am happy to be awake. I'm excited about what my day is going to bring me. I am like motivated. I am in my flow, in my alignment. Things feel beautiful, right? And exciting to me. Not every single day, but most of the time, right? So that's the first question that I would ask, right? Is are you excited to be to wake up and be part of your life? Secondly is, do you feel like you are actively contributing to your life? Meaning, are you actually actively making the choices? Or are you just like part of some whirlwind that like you have absolutely no contributing, actively contributing energy to? So, and then thirdly, when we're looking at the idea of not settling, it's about looking at um, how. Sorry, excuse me for 1 second. I was like,
No
my
worries.
brain. You start a
Yeah,
thought
you
and you're
need a
like,
minute sometimes.
I was like, my thought just started, and then it just went poof. I'm like, okay, poof, okay. Um, Another way to look at am I settling is, do I feel happy, healthy, wealthy in my life? Right? Do I feel turned on? Right? One of the things that I look that a lot of my patients, and what will happen with my patients, is that they'll come to me and they'll say, Carlen, they'll say, I have no sex drive. Or Carlen, I haven't had sex with my partner in a really long time. Carlen, my libido is gone. And then what I'll say to them is, well, did you ever have it? They'll be like, yeah, like it was great. It was wonderful. It was vibrant. And then I'll say, okay, so then what happened? And they'll be like, I don't know. Just like all of a sudden one day it happened. So then I'll go through and be like, okay, so tell me about your life. Do you feel happy and settled about your life? Do you feel like you are actively contributing to your life? Do you feel like there is a growth mindset? You know, surrounding your life. And then as you start to discuss, you start to peel back the layers, we start to recognize, okay, wait a second, there's something that is off here, off here. And because that is one of the things that people highly underestimate, is that once we get to the point where you're no longer, your libido is a little bit off, your desire is a little bit off, your arousal is off, but it used to exist, that is actually, that's just a symptom. That is never the problem. The problem is never, I don't want to have sex anymore. The problem is never, I'm not turned on anymore. That is the symptom. The problem is you're not happy about your situation, about your life, about your choices, or mostly about your personal power in your life and how it is showing up for you, and because of how you are showing up for it.
Right. So what do we do when we discover that and find ourselves in that situation? This is the golden question.
You get an amazing therapist like me, and we walk through the steps as to how to properly transform your life. To be honest with you, I mean, I think that's actually a really valid response, mainly because when we're about to embark on a transformation of our lives, especially if it is something like ending a long-term relationship, right? Please don't try to do it all on your own. You definitely have to do a lot of it on your own. There's a lot of like soul searching and deep emotional work. You will begin to, understand your emotional resilience as well as your emotional endurance, right? I really like talking about emotional endurance right now. You are going to have to do a lot of work on your own, but please always remember that you do have people around you, and that you don't have to do it all on your own, and that there are wonderful healers and services and therapists and friends and family who do want to support you, right? I think that is the first step. Bringing in your trusted community, telling somebody, hey, I'm not happy, help me do this. Don't expect to see the path clear before you, because you're kind of, you're back here and you're trying your best not to fumble fuck your way through it. You know what I mean? And get through. So bring your people in, bring someone in. When you are about to transform your life, and recognize that it is going to be a journey, that transformation, and it's going to be beautiful, but it's going to be hard, but it is going to be so beautiful.
Yeah, as humans, we really avoid change, don't we? That's why we said we get so stuck in this like comfortable corner.
It's easier.
Then we don't want to move.
Yeah, I mean, and for some people that's okay. For some people that's okay. You are happy with that life, and you know what? That's amazing. If you are happy, then that's amazing. But some of us hear a different voice in our hearts, and we have to start actually allowing ourselves to listen to it, not just shutting the door to it all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like some people, they're okay staying in that comfortable space and really never venturing out of that space. And I think it was Tony Robbins who said, like, when they're, and some people, I guess, like you and I, because I mean, I would, it's painful for me to move out of that corner, but I'd have to get out of the corner. I just couldn't stay in the corner. So, and I think he said, when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of the change, then you'll make that transition. Because I was like, I cannot, like, the pain of thinking that I'm going to be trapped in this forever scares the crap out of me way more than actually doing what it takes to either change the situation by participating more, like you said, actively participating more, which I think, by the way, we were just talking off camera about taking responsibility. And I think, and being accountable for your own behavior. Because here's the thing too, you're like 50% of the relationship. So maybe you settled, but you still got yourself there. So it's like, you can't, the blame game doesn't serve anyone, I think.
It's not cute, right? It's not cute. right? You know what a responsible, what a healthy relationship is when you are accountable to it as well. Yes, sometimes people suck. Yes, sometimes people make mistakes. Yes, all of these things. Yes. And
yeah.
if you are going to actually heal from something and move forward and not make the same mistake again, not continue the pattern again, right? Partner after partner after partner, then you need to start being accountable for how you show up in relationships, how your energy contributes to relationships, and how and who you want to be, right? What are you choosing?
Yeah, totally. Well, in our initial conversation as well, I mentioned, I think I said something about, I think I said I'd rather, I said I'd rather be alone than settle. And I said, I think, my standards are quite high. I mentioned something about having high standards. And you said, actually, you've just got well-adjusted standards.
Yes. It's so funny when people say, they're like, oh, your standards are too high, right? And that's like, I just think that's just such bullshit, because that's just a way that's just like a backhanded compliment, in my opinion, right? When people say that, it's like, oh, well, your standards are too high. It's like, no, it's like, this is the life I'm creating. Actually, my standards are right where they need to be, because that is how I value myself, and that is what I work for every single day to achieve and to show up. Like, you know what right?
Totally.
And, yeah.
I've had people say to me, Talia, you're just too fussy. And I'm like, well, you know what? I would rather be way fussy with the person I'm going to spend my life with than not be too fussy, because they're like, because I've been single for quite a while. And I'm okay with that. Like, I mean, yeah, sure, I'd like to find someone, but I want the right person too. I don't just want, I'm not going to settle like we talked about. So it's like, of course I'm going to have, like you say, well-adjusted standards, because I know what I want. And if you don't fit into that, then that's okay. I'll find somebody who does.
And do you know what you want, right? Do you know, like, what is your ideal relationship? What is your ideal partner? How do they show up for you? And are you ready to show up in that way for them as well? Because remember that partnerships and relationships are mirrors. So how you show up, right, very often is going to be mirrored back to you and to trigger something in that relationship. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Something that I have found that many people do see high standards as a problem, and some people even point out, it being the reason why we're not attracting our partner. And I just think that's really interesting, because I'm like, okay.
But like, I think there's a difference between I think there's a big difference between like high standards and whatever that is and what that means, in the way that people are thinking, outrageous standards. Like, if you, I don't think that there's anything wrong in claiming what you want, right? And I think if you are having, if you are really investing in your self-awareness and having real conversations with yourself and being like, this is what I want. However, this is also what I achieve. This is also, how I'm showing up for it. Well-adjusted standards.
Yeah. I love that you keep coming back to, okay, so how am I showing up for this? I'm saying this is what I want, but what's my behavior? What am I bringing to the table? I think that's really, really great. Yeah.
Well, it's the law of attraction, right? And like, here's the thing: words are spells, and the law of attraction is real. Those are just facts I live by. You know why? I say that because as a psychotherapist, all I do every day is hear people talk to me, talk at me, right? And the way we speak is what we believe. And if we believe it, then that is what we receive. And that is what we see around us. So if you think everything is shit, well, then you're only going to get shit, right? If you think you're bad luck, then you're only going to fall into bad luck, right?
Yeah, you keep attracting.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because you will attract it. That's just what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I used to have a friend like that. He was always angry. He was a real cranky pants all the time.
Yeah.
And he would always find himself in these like really crap situations. And I was like, dude, like, how can you not see that you're like totally attracting this? And I mean, I'm not saying like every single bad thing that's ever happened to you is your fault. No, that's not what I'm
No.
saying. But I'm saying that like does seem to be some correlation between
Absolutely.
like what's happening around you and your attitude. Like, you know, is that not
Yeah.
something that you're
Angry
seeing?
attracts angry. Yeah, yeah. Like if like are you like here's the thing. Look around you right now. If you think, your world, if you think that the people around you are really angry, right? If you look at the primary four people surrounding you right now, think about what you see. Think about what you feel when you're with them. Think about how they make you feel. Now see that being reflected back to you. Because quite often that means that you are probably also the angry person, or you also may be contributing to some of the laziness, or that you are also maybe not stepping up and communicating.
Yeah, that's a
Right?
huge
if
one.
you if you find that people aren't talking to you, well, how are you holding space, and are you talking to people as well?
Yeah. Isn't it
Right.
crazy when you have those, like we were just talking about the realizations, like with my mom realizing that I disagreed with her, and other times when I've realized like, oh my gosh, like I totally behave in this way and I didn't realize it. I did not realize that I was I mean, what's a good example? Like for example, I remember there was a time, I can't remember exactly what was happening, but I was like, I thought I was communicating this really clearly. Actually, I think it was to one of my staff members, and I was like, she only knows what I tell her. So I was like, in terms of this particular scenario, so I was like,
Yeah.
okay, she's not getting it, so it's my fault. I'm not communicating it
Yes.
to her, and I thought I was, but
Yes.
obviously I wasn't. So I was like, okay, Talia, rein it back. Like, what does she need to know in a more clear way? How can you say it in a more clear way? And I was saying to myself, like, if you can't say it in a more clear way, then you need to figure it out. You need to
Well,
figure it
and
out.
it's well, how you figure it out is stop looking at how is a little bit less of looking. It's a mix. Sorry, it's a mix of looking at how are you communicating it, and how do people understand you as
Receive it.
well,
Mm-hmm.
right? So not everybody learns the same way.
Yeah.
Not everybody communicates the same way. That's why there's love languages.
Yeah.
That's why there's different modes of ways to communicate. So there's something to be said for, are you communicating clearly, but are you allowing people to hear you as well? Like, are you communicating in a way that people can hear you, right? Are you speaking their language?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So active communication requires checking in and saying, hey, what are you hearing? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? What are you receiving from me right now?
Yeah. 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 That's really clear. That's
Right?
really
What does
clear.
this mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is what it means to me.
So talking about checking in, actually, here's a question for you. How do we
Okay.
know that we're actually settling and not avoiding intimate relationships? Because here's the thing,
How
like,
do
yeah,
Okay.
I know a lot of people who are a little bit commitment-ophobe. I have a friend of mine. She's so amazing. She doesn't even have Wi-Fi at her place. And I'm like, how can you not have Wi-Fi? Like and she goes, I just use my
Oh.
phone. And I'm like, hang on a second. How long have you been in your place for? And she's like, 5 years. She goes, I don't want to commit to Wi-Fi. I was like, okay. And
Oh.
then someone said to her, you can take it with you when you leave. And she's like, oh, really?
Yeah.
It was really funny. But I was like, okay. And we often joke about how like there's a little bit of commitment phobe there, right? And how do we know that we're not commitment phobes, or that we're like, that we don't, I don't know, this settling thing. So how do you know we're actually settling and not avoiding? Like, if, I don't know if that question is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get it. I get it. Yeah. How do you know that how do you know that you're not kind of pulling the wool over your own eyes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
How
Yeah, the checking in. How do we know we're telling the truth to ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's why I do really reiterate the importance of bringing in your community and recognizing that healing and understanding who you are has definitely a lot of self-reflective work, but I think it's really important to bring in other tools around you, right? And other tools, and to learn about yourself from various perspectives, right? So working with a therapist, working with a Reiki healer, I don't know, working with a fitness coach, working with a business coach, working with, different people. I think that is how we start to check ourselves, because when you can bring in other people, when you can build that community around you, right? It will become revealed. You know what I mean? Like when because people will call you out on your shit. It's inevitable that if you you expand your community, you build your village, people will call you out on where you're tossing your shit in that village, right? So I think that is actually a really big recognition. So if you find that you are just by yourself a lot, and you're that's actually not fair to say, but if you want to be in a relationship and you haven't been in a long time, and you're kind of in that place of like, well, why haven't I been in a relationship a long time? Or if you're in a relationship and you're saying to yourself, I've been in this a long time, is this where I want to be? And where, is this my max potential?
Right.
I think that's when we start to recognize, are we settling, or are we just kind of holding space for ourselves until what makes, what is in our alignment and our flow to come forth, right? For us to receive. So I think a big question is to ask yourself, are you achieving your maximum potential? Do you feel, turned on by your own life? And if the answer is no, then you need to start seeking some of that support. You need to start seeking your tribe, your community. You need to start doing that work, and nurture that growth, that things, right? If you are keeping yourself from the rest of the world, then that's your choice.
Right.
That is you. So you're not, at that point, you're not settling. At that point, you're lying to yourself. Right?
Yeah. I think that, yeah. Well, yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. Like people saying, well, I just don't want to settle, but actually not being honest with myself. And maybe I'm got a problem with commitment, but I'm kind of saying, well, I don't want to settle. I don't want to settle. And I think, like you said, just that inquiry into ourselves and the constant inquiry too. Like it doesn't stop.
Yeah. And to not be afraid, right? It can be, I think it takes a lot of courage to look at yourself in the mirror, right? I think it takes a lot of courage and to ask yourself these hard questions, and to really step up for your life. It's easy to show up for other people. It's easy. It's not, it's not easy, but it is much more comfortable for many people to show up for others before it is to show up for themselves.
Yeah, I knew what you meant by saying easy in that
Thank
context.
You.
Yeah,
that's what I meant to say. Yeah, I was like,
yeah.
Oh, I don't want to say I want people to get mad at me. I'm like, no, it's not actually easy.
No, I knew what you meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is much more comfortable. Yeah. It's much more comfortable to stand up for somebody else than to stand up for yourself or to put in the work. And it's interesting as well. I just want to point out for those of you, because I know that sometimes not everyone's in the financial position where they can afford coaches. And I'm a huge advocate for coaches and therapists because I've gotten so much out of them. But I have that I don't have to pay for. I have my, I call them my panel of advisors, which is basically just trusted people in my life. Like my best friends are my panel of advisors. My mother is, and maybe yours might be, or they might not be. I hope your best friend is, because otherwise they wouldn't be your best friend. But then it's like, like you just go to them and you have those serious conversations with them, like you said, and they can call you out and reflect back. And sometimes, here's the thing too, sometimes it's not always right. Like, it's not always like, oh, well, she said this, so that's the way it is. It's like what they're reflecting back to you, and then let it sit within you and go, hang on, how's that feeling for me? How's that feeling? Because sometimes my best friend will say things, I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but when she does, and sometimes it'll sting a little bit and it'll be like, ooh, and I'll be like, hang on, why is that bothering me? Number one. And if it is, why is it bothering me? Is there some truth to it?
Yes, exactly. Why is that bothering me? And because there is some truth to it. That's why it's bothering you. Because there is some truth to it.
More
right?
often than
triggers are our biggest teachers.
Yeah.
Right. So if things trigger you, if you are having a response to something, right, that means that there is something there for you about you to uncover. There's some work there for you to do.
Yeah.
Right. Whether that's a person, whether that's an emotion, whether that's an idea, whether that's an ideology, even. Right. Triggers are our biggest teachers. So how are we holding space for that? And for the work, and being accountable to ourselves for the work that we still may or may not have to do. If you're asking yourself, am I settled? Like if you're in the position where you're like, am I lying to myself or am I settling right now? Right. I think more often than not, the answer to that, if you're like, no, I'm not lying to myself, right? You probably are.
You probably know, right? Yeah, because you're kind of got that inkling to ask the question.
Yeah. So it is time to seek inspiration. It is time to seek change.
Well, Carlen, this has been so amazing. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to see if you could tell us a little bit about your Everyday Goddess program.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So you can definitely hang out with me on my website, carlencosta.com, and sign up for the Goddess program, which is an 8-week program where I work through you from a transformative and therapeutic perspective to heal your life into the goddess that you want to be and embrace everything for that she is. Or you can join me in the Sex for Breakfast Club, which is a community of women, and we talk about sex and pleasure and heal our lives in a variety of different ways as well. But just hang out with me on my Instagram at carlen.costa or on my website at carlencosta.com.
Awesome. Sex for Breakfast. I love that.
Right?
So great.
Because orgasms are like more effective than coffee or apples.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know. You feel so good. So true. Right? So true. You just feel so refreshed. He's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like I just want everybody to have orgasms. Really. That's like my life mission. Actually, I didn't tell you. I do have a campaign called the 1 Million Orgasm Campaign. And I have like this ticker on my website, and you can go on, and every day that you have an orgasm, you just like put it in. Like you just put in, I had an orgasm today. And I just want like to calculate and see all these orgasms, because it brings me so much joy that people are connecting with their pleasure, because pleasure is power. And that's what the Everyday Goddess brand is all about.
Oh, awesome. That's so awesome. I'm definitely going to go and update that for mine.
Yes, great.
Well, you can find all the links mentioned in this episode and links to Carlen's website at rebellove.com/EP20. Again, that's rebellove.com/EP20. Thank you again, Carlen. You're a legend, and have a lovely 2021.
Thank you. Happy 2021.
Thanks for listening to the Rebel Love podcast, the podcast about love, sex, relationships, and money. If you like this episode, please support us by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. And find all the details of this episode and more at rebellove.com/podcast.